Well, it's 5:30, so I think we should go ahead and get started. This is the work session for the Bountiful City Council. My name is Chris Simonson. I'm a member of the Bountiful City Council, and I will be the mayor pro tem for this night. Mayor Lewis is out of town. We're going to have a discussion of 3 individual topics during our work session. The first one is going to be the skate park discussion, which will last about 30 minutes. We're going to do the CARES Act funding discussion, which will last about 15 minutes. And then we'll finally come up with the end, which is the department updates, which will last about 45 minutes. And we'd like to finish our work session at 10 minutes to 7 before we start our city council. So if there's no further ado, let's turn our time over to our city manager, Gary, to lead us out on the park discussion, skate park discussion, please.
Okay, I think I'll come up here so I can see the screen.
Absolutely.
Take this off so I can be heard as well. Thank you, Council and Mayor Pro Tem.
Is Mayor Lewis with us now? Do we know?
He was going to try. I don't know if he's on or not. Not yet.
Could you let us know if he comes on? Okay, thanks.
He told me he may or may not have coverage this week. So, but appreciate the opportunity to talk. Back in June, we found out, some of us for the first time, others knew for a long time, that there was some skating happening in one of our retention ponds, detention basins rather, on Moss Hill Drive and Vineyard. That's on the map right here. It was so beloved that it actually had a name. It was called the Pit. But we had some complaints from some neighbors about the use that was going on there. And when staff became aware of kind of what was in there and the fact that it could affect the way it was installed, it could affect the use of the detention basin, we removed it. Since that time, I've met with several of the users of that park and their families, and who are concerned, obviously, that we took away a place that was being used by them, and whether or not permission was granted. There was no agreement to use it or anything like that. They certainly had enjoyed the use of it for a long time. And I think you're all aware that they'd come to council meetings as well, looking for a long-term solution for a skate park. And there may be some opportunities coming up for that, if the bond passes and a few other things. But in the meantime, we started a discussion too with the group about a possible temporary location for a park. And by temporary, I mean a location where, if necessary, improvements could be removed without too much difficulty. I want to introduce you to Sterling Rip, who's behind me, and Sterling is sort of the ringleader of the group. He put a lot of effort with his family and friends into what happened in the pit, but also in organizing an effort to meet with me. And Sterling, I don't know if you want to introduce any of your cohorts here. I know Ethan, and I can't remember your last name, Ethan. Louder. So Ethan is the owner of the skate shop over at the Square, and is apparently doing pretty good in his first year there. There's a lot of interest, and met with Ethan as well. Sterling, do you want to introduce your other friends here?
Yes, this is my buddy Gabe. We all grew up building this spot at the pit. Henry and then Alec, their brothers, the Whitneys. So
yeah, we live just nearby, so we all grew up within about a block radius of this pit. And we spent a lot of time there growing up, probably a lot.
Well, and I've appreciated the opportunity to get to know Ethan and Sterling and some of the others that have been involved with these conversations and the manner in which they've gone about, I think, discussing it with the city. Awesome. Good to have you all here. As we met, we talked about potential locations, and I tasked the group with, go out and look around and see if there are some spaces that might work. And there's a certain number of requirements to have a use like this. One, you have to have the correct surface. Parking can be an issue, has to have the ability to have a little bit of space. And of course, neighbor concerns is always an issue when you're doing any kind of new use. It doesn't matter how popular the use is. We all know from even Creekside Park that anything that's new or different, people can get concerned about. So with that kind of assignment, after our first meeting, they went out and looked at a few different areas and suggested some. We did the same with staff and talked about the possibility of some locations. And we've identified together 3, although there's a clear preference of the 3 at which we think would work. And if none of these work, I think we would continue to look. But the 3 that we've identified are first, reinstalling some improvements at the pit, which would be built in a way that they wouldn't interfere with the storm drain function. We've talked with Todd and with Lloyd about the feasibility of doing that. And we think we could accommodate both. We'll talk pros and cons in a minute. The second is at Rocket Park on the existing underutilized basketball court. And then the third is at a cul-de-sac at the top of about 600 North and 13th East. It's the cul-de-sac. It's been there for ages. Now we have a brand new shiny working water tank just behind it. But as we looked at each of those sites, they, some had more issues than others. The advantage of the pit is I've seen pictures before and after and what the group does every spring to get it ready. And one advantage is they took good care of the property, taking down the weeds, maintaining it in a way that would work for them, but it also made the functionality of that. So I would expect that we would see the same benefit of that. It's familiar to them. It's got good visibility. One of the items we talked about with the police department is that wherever a skate park is, it needs to have a decent amount of visibility from the street or from surrounding uses, because that always discourages vandalism. Not necessarily worried about vandalism by the users, but potentially other people or visitors. A good example of this would be the detention basin by the B on Stone Creek, which constantly gets graffiti because nobody's there and nobody sees it. Whereas if you have something that's visible, it's going to decrease the likelihood you're going to have illegal activity going on there. So great visibility for this. And then detention basins are commonly used for recreation in other communities. A lot of them have basketball hoops installed or park pavilions and things like that. So there are some benefits to that. The biggest drawback, frankly, to this one is I don't think there's going to be any way to appease the neighbors that's a good location for that use. There's no nearby off-street parking. And Sterling, maybe I can ask you, and any of the rest of you too, but I know that you've talked with some of the neighbors, your feelings about whether or not the neighbors could come around to that use.
Yeah, I think it's just a noise issue. It is pretty loud, especially from the house just east of it. They got a balcony that's probably like 30 feet from it, so. But all the other surrounding neighbors, I know Alec, the Whitneys know the people just north of it on the corner, and they must have a problem with it.
I think one of the biggest concerns that have come up when I've talked to neighbors has been like cars constantly on the street, which is, there actually is quite a bit of area there that's not on a house. You can fit maybe even 5 cars. A lot of the skaters who use the pit aren't bringing a car to the pit, but occasionally, like as it got more popular last year, people actually started bringing cars. So that was an issue that kind of made it more visible. Because when just kids would go there after school, it wasn't usually in a car. And then like a restroom nearby, that's a problem, I guess. And there are a few things like that. But the general consensus from neighbors was typically pretty positive. I mean, at least to our faces.
Good point.
Yeah. I mean, just immediately west of it, like very positive, and kitty corner northwest of it, also positive. So, it just varies. Like, I think they're used to it, but the main benefit I see of another spot could be to give them a break for a bit, because it has been years of skaters there. Maybe install a basketball hoop and let let a new crowd use it.
I don't know about those rowdy basketball players. So that's one site. It definitely has some advantages, but I think overcoming the neighborhood concerns is going to be really challenging there. And Millie, you've talked to a lot of those neighbors. I don't know if you feel any differently than that. You're smiling, so at least it looks like you're smiling. Your eyes are smiling.
I am smiling. And these boys know that I live in the neighborhood, and when neighbors complained to me about it, and I brought it to Gary, I said to him very much, I am 50-50 on this one. My kids use it, my kids loved it. And it was one of those things that unfortunately right is right and right is wrong. And when a complaint was brought to me, I had to take it to the city. And I know that you all understand that. At least I hope you understand that I was kind of in a rock and a hard place. The neighbors who have voiced their concerns to me, they would appreciate if it were somewhere else. The neighbors directly to the south, he has gone out with trash bags asking kids to clean up. The other neighbors have also had to go out and ask people not to relieve themselves on their property. And I said to Gary, 99.9% of the people are very respectful. Unfortunately, the ones who weren't, it just was not a good situation. So it just depends on who you ask, but the people who have complained about it, it would not go over well if it came back. But is that a big enough reason not to put it back? So.
I mean, we know that there's almost no use that
You can't
everybody's
please
happy
it.
about.
Yeah, exactly. You can't please everybody.
But if we can find a better location, I think that's what we're after. So the second location is at Rocket Park, and I showed there's a map of this in your packet, but for the benefit of those who are playing along at home or who haven't been part of this conversation, this was a suggestion made by the skate committee, and it has a lot of style. We have a basketball court in the middle of the park there, and Francisco, I don't know if you can put your cursor over there, a little to your left. It's green, there it is.
There.
Yep, that's the basketball court. And if you zoom back out, you'll see that where that's situated is pretty ideal. It's really dead center in the park. The neighbor to the west is the treatment plant. To the north, you have the ball fields. The south, you have the ball fields, all separating the use from neighbors. And then to the east, you have the tennis courts, the playground, the street before you get to any neighbors. Has plenty of off-street parking. We challenged the guys to keep an eye on it and see what the use was like for basketball. We did the same thing on our part, Brock and his staff did. And there's very, very little basketball use on that court. I think a couple of times they reported they saw people on the court, but they were standing and talking, not actually playing ball. I think once maybe between staff and the committee that there was a report of some people playing basketball over the course of the last month, but I think it was checked nearly every day. Some other things to that site, there's no lighting on that, and so that that would limit the hours that skating could be done there. Visibility, actually, you can see that pretty well from 13th East. That was pointed out by Boone Hewish, who isn't here tonight, who's a member of the skate group. It has a lot going for it. It's a good surface. There would have to be some improvements to it. We'd have to probably take off the basketball sort of surface. It's not very friendly to knees. It's a little abrasive. But that wouldn't permanently damage the surface or the material, the concrete at all. And we've had a donation of a pledge of $10,000 towards the improvements that would need to go into putting the equipment there and the improvements that need to take place. We would have to take the standards out, which incidentally are all, I think, slightly shorter than 10 feet anyway. But we'd have to take those out. And at some point in the future, they need to be replaced, which could come at some cost. Nothing extreme. It's not quite as visible as the pit on the downside. It would replace an existing use, but we believe an underused use. But overall, it's a pretty great location, I think, for what we're talking about, especially since it's already a park. People are used to noise and activity. That has a great advantage to it. Sterling, anything to add on that site that I missed?
You got it all.
Okay.
I've been there actually a few times to skateboard, and it is a nice surface. It's a little abrasive, but there's no joints in the concrete because of that coating that's over it. So it's really nice actually. And from my experience, I've only been down there. I mean, I live nearby, but sporadically. But I haven't seen people use it for basketball, and that's probably a little biased, but it's the truth, and the location is great for apps. I think it would solve a lot of problems. There won't be cars in front of people's houses, which is definitely one of the biggest concerns of neighbors, you know. So.
And hey, restrooms. I didn't even think about that when I put the pros and cons, but yeah, that's a great advantage to that site. And then the last one that we looked at that came up was not far away. It's this cul-de-sac that we mentioned at the top of, I guess, 5th North and 13th East. It's pretty flat. A lot of the concrete or asphalt has been damaged. It probably need an overlay to smooth that out. You're really close to it there, Francis.
There you
That's
go.
it. There you go.
Mhm.
That doesn't show now that we have a reservoir, just to the east of it. But again, it's separated from people. It's underutilized or not utilized. One thing that was pointed out is if you lose a board down the road, that's kind of a bummer because that's a pretty steep approach from 13th East. And asphalt's not a great surface for skating anyway. But those are the three main ones that we identified. And I guess tonight, council, we're here to just have a conversation with you. If you want us to spend any more time pursuing a temporary location for a skate park, and if you are, and if you're comfortable with the idea of a temporary skate park, then if you're comfortable, it'd be great to have a go-ahead on a location if you're comfortable with one of these. And then we would continue to work as staff with the committee on regulations such as hours of operation, responsibility for policing and maintaining, just developing a relationship between the city and the local skaters. I think I mentioned in the report, it's been my experience with facilities like these that the local groups that own, and by own I mean that invest themselves in these things, tend to take really good care of them. Was there some comment back here?
I didn't want to interrupt, but I want to point out that it's a great opportunity to just kind of take a second to look at the skaters and the youth of our city who have invested a lot of time and kind of give them a space where you can see how it works and just kind of get some feedback. And I mean, there's nothing too permanent about this idea, so it's a great test run or trial run to work out problems that would have to be worked out if there was a permanent place designated and bountiful to skateboard. Things like developing a set of rules, or what if we need to set hours on it, or things like that will be really easy to work out in an opportunity like this that's a trial period.
I would just like to say I'm very impressed with the willingness to do this legwork, and I'm hoping that we can come to a compromise, because I really do think it's a great thing for the kids to have. Like I said, my kids played there all the time. They would always say, "Can we walk over?" And I had another thought. I apologize.
You're too young.
You'll have to come back. Well, I was getting kids out to baseball games, so you'll have to excuse me. Move on to the next person. I can't.
I think Tolman Park sounds like a great place to have a temporary location, and I'd love to see it happen. One of my questions is, how far will that $10,000 go in accomplishing that? Do you have any estimates to know if that gets us where we need to be to put it in place, or?
Based on some preliminary conversations with the committee, I think it's because we aren't having to pour any additional concrete. Almost all of it can go into improvements like the rails, the ramps, things like that, and that should be plenty of money. In fact, maybe even a little left to be able to put aside so that in the event we need to restore basketball hoops or replace a basketball hoop someplace else, that might be available. Maybe I can ask Alan, who's here, if you don't mind coming up. He's the wallet, and maybe you can introduce you remember Alan, he came to the public comment earlier, but maybe you can give some input on that.
Sure, yeah, just to echo the skating idea, it's great. I skated as a kid all the way through age 16, and I didn't turn out too bad. I think I'm okay. But super excited, the willingness, by the way, just kudos to Gary. Most cities don't have such a wonderful kind of just person to direct these efforts and channel it in a positive, productive way. So I think as far as costs go, yeah. Did I say wonderful? Maybe phenomenal is a better word. How about that? But Gary really was just a real facilitator with the community, and just the openness was just really great. So as far as costs go, on the Tolman Park.
You might go back to Tolman.
Yeah, so on the Tolman site, if we remove the surface, it's just a layer, and we could still preserve all the concrete. It's a post-tension slab, so that's something that's great. That's why it doesn't have cracks, right? So it's under tension. But if we remove the surface, that's going to take some money to do that. But we would be able to put in things like things to rail slide and axle grind, and maybe a small launch ramp or something. Those types of. Did I get the terms right? Yeah, okay, good. Still the same terms. I was a Powell Peralta guy, so I didn't know if it changed since then. But anyway, bottom line is we should be able to get just mainly surface amenities, nothing super tall or high on this. It's going to be more of a kind of a streetscape type skating atmosphere, to where they can, just perform more like surface tricks, right? But all of that should be able to be done in the 10 grand that we're going to donate in in-kind materials, labor, and equipment. So we should be on this, like Gary said, having a hard surface that's already in place. That's a $40,000 investment if you had to put that concrete down. So I think that's what we estimate, about $38,000. And that wouldn't include a post-tensioning system. That would just be a standard, just surface concrete. So that's the huge advantage here. So you save the hard surface improvement. I don't know if does that kind of help?
That's great. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
It's great.
Do we have any other questions from the council? Our half hour is just about up. Kate?
What is the likelihood that any elements that we build here could be moved to a more permanent location later on? Would they be like bolted in, or could they be transported if there was another skate park?
I think that's a good question. The answer is yes. The stuff we would make, fabricate, would be a tube steel, or maybe modifying some I-beams with attachments. But yes, all of it would be relocatable. And we could design it that way.
Okay. So I like this idea a lot, and I do think kudos are owed to Gary for engaging and bringing people together, and also huge kudos to these young men who I think, skaters get a bit of a bad rap. I have seen nothing but positives for the youth of Bountiful out of this group in terms of the ingenuity with what they created at the pit, the problem solving skills, and the ability to engage with their government that they have shown the last couple months. And so, I think there is a bright future for skating here.
Yeah,
Any further comments,
2 thumbs up.
council? Do we have a motion as to whether we should pursue?
I don't think you need a motion. I think we just need the heads
Thumbs
up,
up,
and it sounds
thumbs
like
up
we
from the
got it.
council as far as promoting and moving forward is that,
Thumbs up
I think
for
we should
Rocket
Rocket
Park.
Park.
Yep.
Is Rocket Park good for?
Rocket Park, that'd be nice.
Is that a motion to change the name of the park as well? Back to its real name?
Every year you make that motion.
it's a new park name.
No,
At
that
the
sounds
point,
great.
at the point where we can also restore the Rocket Playground and Slide,
Yes.
I will be happy to second that motion.
Okay.
Someday
So
before I
is
retire.
it consensus of the council that we move
Yes.
ahead?
Move ahead.
Yes.
Everyone?
Yes.
Okay, Gary, you heard. Let's
Thanks,
move ahead.
council. We have the direction we need. We'll keep
Yes.
meeting with these good folks, and we'll,
Come back
I think
to
you're
us.
going to see some things happen pretty quick.
Great.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, gentlemen.
And thank you, young men. Thank you. We appreciate you. It's going to be great. Make one,
You don't have to stay. You're welcome to stay for CARES Act funding.
Gary, let me make one quick comment. 1962, I made my own skateboard, and it was my little brother's skates. And I drilled them into a 2x4, 2x6 board. And I went from the top of Old Main, Utah State University, to the sidewalk and only broke 2 ribs. So I admire what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you.
Went out there on Monday. See what, maybe I'll go down for you.
Give it a try. Give it a try. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, guys.
I didn't
Thank
know
you.
we had a personal lawyer here for us, like this. It was a good case, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I take all my tips from our city attorney.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You used to come in, you were our dentist, I recognize your voice, I haven't seen you in a long time, but the second you started talking, I thought I was the dentist.
So are you still flossing every night?
I have
Okay, you're out of here. Okay. So Gary, let's move on to the second item, CARES Act funding.
His face was always covered. So he probably-
I do have to say that I wish every potentially difficult situation in the city was as easy to work out with that group has been. They've been phenomenally,
Well, and I think
phenomenally
you
easy
and
to work
you
with.
and Kate were good shock absorbers at the very beginning, and I think that needs to be acknowledged. So thank you both.
Yeah, that first meeting was really key, wasn't it?
The first meeting is key, and finding things that we could talk to him about that set some common ground.
Yeah. So thanks, council. I think that's going to work out well. Okay, on page 7 of your packet is the staff report about the CARES Act. I don't want to go into a lot of the background of the CARES Act unless you'd like us to. Needless to say, it's money that's available from the federal government for response during the pandemic, made available to local governments with some pretty decent restrictions, and unfortunately not a ton of clarifying guidance on what the money can be used for. We did just receive the second tranche of 3 this week. I don't know if the money's actually in the bank, but we've submitted for. Is that right, Galen?
It will, they said it will be available sometime after the 27th, a couple of days.
Okay. And so to date, as soon as we receive that, we will have received about $2.6 million. And we, like everyone else in local government, has been looking for how we can use this, knowing that what we've done is we've entered into an agreement with the state that we will be subject to any rules of use now or in the future for that funding. So it means that they could clarify their guidance after we've spent it, and we would be subject to that future guidance. So we've been as careful as we can in trying to determine what we can use the money for. We feel pretty comfortable now with the guidance that we've received on how the funding can be spent. And let me outline for you beginning at the bottom of page 7, where we think as staff, we can safely and possibly wisely use the funds. It looks like I'm missing a page of my staff report. Did it? Oh, I inserted the PDF in the middle of my staff report. Thank you. I didn't notice that. Okay, so we know that for sure direct expenditures that we make for personal protective equipment called PPE, for hand sanitizer, for anything directly related to the response that will protect employees, or that is equipment necessary to protect us or residents from the virus. All of that's available to be reimbursed. To date, we haven't spent a lot of money. I think about made expenditures in the realm of around 12. Is it 7 or 12, Galen? About 12. We expect we may be as much as $40,000 or $50,000, maybe as high as 70 by the time it's all said and done. But there just isn't a lot of, for us, PPE that we need to purchase. Second area, though, is we have agencies around us that we're a part of that haven't received any money that have greater needs, and that includes South Davis Metro Fire and the Recreation District. They both have calculated cost. We worked kind of together as city managers to find out what their needs were, and if we had available funds, could they be beneficial to those agencies who otherwise would either increase their own fees or rates to pay for them, or in the case of the fire district, it could make our assessment bigger. So there's a direct benefit to Bountiful City by using CARES Act for these agencies. And I think the staff report shows that they both have spent money. The fire district has spent nearly $250,000 in PPE. And if we were to distribute our share of that, if we were to distribute based on population, which is how we receive it, would be about $100,000. Rec district is somewhat less than that. And then we also this is the guidance we've been waiting the most on, is whether or not we could use it for salary and benefit for our own public safety. Initially, before there was any guidance from the Treasury Department, it seemed pretty clear that we could not. It can't be used for revenue replacement. It has to be for things that weren't previously budgeted. But then the Treasury Department provided some guidance that made a presumption that because of the nature of COVID-19, it could be assumed that the work of our public safety officers has all been altered because of COVID-19. So if you go to page 8 of the packet, this is bullet point number 2. I'm going to take you to the second paragraph that is not in bold. Their answer to the question of whether or not it could be used to meet payroll expenses for public safety says the fund is designed to provide ready funding to address unforeseen financial needs and risks created by COVID-19. For this reason, and as a matter of administrative convenience in light of the emergency nature of the program, a state, territorial, local, or tribal government may presume that payroll costs for public health and public safety employees are payments for services substantially dedicated to or mitigating, et cetera, et cetera. It's those terms of we may for administrative convenience presume that it gave us a greater level of comfort. I don't think we're quite there yet. Following this being issued, there was a Zoom meeting with counsel from the Treasury Department with the state auditors, the clerk auditors in the state and a number of other people. And they asked him directly if that's what that language meant. And he reiterated absolutely that that's what we intended, was that this could go for our public safety costs. We debated this for a good month. And I think to greater or lesser degrees feel comfortable that that's the case. The worst case scenarios of this is money that we would pay anyway. And if we were to use this money to reimburse our costs, if in the future they said it's not eligible, we would have to reimburse that cost anyway. So if we held our own money, a certain amount in reserve, for a couple of years to make sure that this expense is covered, I think that more than makes us safe to be able to spend it on that. There's quite a discussion going around with all the cities, not just in Utah, about this, and I think the majority are planning to use their funds for this purpose. but I don't want to overstate that. I think it's fair to say that, so Clint, Galen, Tyson, and I spent a lot of time reviewing this. On the conservative side, I think you have Tyson, who's suggesting that it's not crystal clear that we can use this way. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have me and Clint, I think, who feel that the presumption is clear enough that we can. I don't want to overstate or understate anything. I appreciate the healthy level of discussion that we have about this. I said all that before you because we want to let you know that at this point, we're pretty comfortable that we could do this safely. There is a small risk that we might have to pay it back, but I personally think that risk is very, very small. Galen, Tyson, or Clint, would you guys like to add anything to that?
Probably just one thing I might add to it, it goes along with what you're saying there. It's also eager. If we did end up having to do, well, we went down this road of paying for those costs with the funds for the public safety related costs. They are budgeted already, but the guidance requires that if the funds are used, that it presumes that the services of the public safety has been redirected to handling COVID-19. So that's the premise that they're going under. But even if it was question cost later in the audit, I guess it could be, and I think Clint feels the same way, that and Tyson as well, that we budgeted for paying for them anyway, and so it would be nothing, out of pocket that way, even if we had to get that money back, because we would have already budgeted for that. The funds we wouldn't have spent would go into the general funds budget or balance, and we just reappropriate it and pay the state back. If worse comes to worse, that's one approach or thought.
Right. Thanks, Galen. Anything to add, guys?
I would just add that we're still hoping that the Treasury puts out a little more guidance on this. They said that they would, and we're hoping that they do, so that it can be very concrete as we move forward with the decision. But at the moment, we just don't know. And with the federal government, you never know when you can expect some guidance. So we're hopeful, but not sure.
We don't have to make a decision on that right now. I pointed out because we do have other entities that are asking for additional money, and if we are going to use it for our own public safety, we probably don't want to let that money go, all of it. And so, but we would need to decide before December 30th at this point, and then what we could simply do is just back all of the expenses that we've had since the money was made available, or since the pandemic started. So I think it goes back to March, does it not? March 1st. I'll come back to a question for Tyson. But, and then the other category is grants made available for businesses. We can do that as well. Davis County started a conversation with cities months ago about this, recognizing that it might not be, and I was part of those conversations, it might not make sense for every city to develop its own grant program, be tasked with tracking all of the grants, doing the reporting, federal reporting on the grants, all the administrative costs that goes with that. And so they volunteered to do that and have been doing that. They were allocated, I believe, $31 million and set aside a fair amount, which escapes me right now, but it's in that staff report, $5 million toward grants to date. I think with their next tranche, they may allocate more. Bountiful businesses are eligible regardless. All county businesses are, but they get ranked slightly higher if we participate in the funding as well. And I think they get an additional point if it's a 25% match by Bountiful. As for who's applied right now, we've had $1.4 million worth of asks from Bountiful businesses that are being considered. Bountiful's portion of that, if we did 25% match, and we could do more or we could do less, that's the minimum amount of match by which a business will get any points. I think the most they can get is 3 if we did a 50% match, but the minimum match is 25%, so that's $360,000. So with that, Council, I'd just like to get your thoughts and some guidance on eligible expenses. If you're comfortable, especially with maybe our partner agencies, we could begin looking right now at providing some funding to them. I think other cities are a little further down the path with them in the county than we are. We've just been, as I mentioned, kind of extra cautious, waiting for guidance. So questions and comments, and we don't even need to make a decision tonight, but I know the county's anxious at a minimum.
Questions from the council?
How confident are you in the 3 tranches from the state? I know we've got tranche 1, tranche 2 should be transferring over to our accounts, but it seems the state, from other conversations, is a little bit iffy about whether they're going to pass through to cities that don't get a direct appropriation in the 3rd tranche.
Yeah, great question. And I'm glad you brought it up. I'm not super confident that the state's going to distribute all of it if they distribute any of it. I think they may choose a different allocation formula. The first, all of it was distributed based on population. So that means communities like a Park City that has a very small permanent population received very little funding. I mean, they have 7,500 permanent residents, but a peak wintertime population of around 45,000. And so, you know, I think there's some sympathy from the state, plus state needs by themselves. You know, they may retain some of it. So I'm not super confident that we'll get the 3rd tranche. And
So
if we do, I think it'll be reduced.
If I have my math right, so in the 2 tranches, Bountiful would have 2.6 million.
Mhm.
And if we didn't bet on the 3rd tranche, because 2020 is not a year worth betting on. And then if on the staff report of the calculation of direct city expenditures, a share to South Davis Metro Fire, a share to the rec district, a 25% match on the Davis Cares program, is it about $550,000? So
Yep.
we could at least participate to those levels and still be able to play out additional guidance on our further public safety commitment.
Yes. Yep. Comfortably.
What is the far end range of what, if we were to go to the farthest extent of Treasury guidance possible for our public safety costs by year end, what would that far number look like?
It exceeds the total number of total amount of CARES Act dollars that
It exceeds
we'll receive.
2.6 million?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is Tyson's conservative number of going the other way, of being super conservative on the Treasury's guidance for the end of the year?
That's a good question. If we were to interpret the CARES Act and say public safety is not eligible expense, then we, to be honest, the city would never be able to spend all that money.
Would be just tons of hand sanitizer.
Well, you can't even stockpile it for future events, is what they've told us. We can't buy it in case there's another emergency. So can't even do that.
Any further questions for Gary?
I really like this proposal, supporting these things. I really like the grant. I mean, you know, the 25% is nice, but 50% would be even better. But I really like the proposal for these different components.
Do we know if the 1.4 million in current asks from businesses, are all those businesses still operating?
I don't know.
Okay. I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
sorry.
That's a good
I can find out
No,
though.
just
I'm sure.
wondering.
No, it's a
Well,
good question.
I'm sure we can find out. No, but I think at a minimum, it might be good to know if you're comfortable with sharing with South Davis Metro and the Rec District, and to begin with. Is that any heartburn?
I'm concerned about other cities have agreed to do the match for the Davis Cares Grant Program, and we haven't. Yet we have businesses in our community that we know are hurting that have applied. I worry we disadvantage them by continuing to delay when we know we've got 2 or 3 tranches sitting in our checking account. So I would be comfortable doing the 550,000 as currently outlined of our 2.6, and then reevaluating at some point whether we go from the 25% match to the 50% match, or whether we're able to carefully stretch our treasury guidance for our own public safety needs at that point. I worry that we've had businesses that are struggling for many months now, and I would like to see us do what we can to help lift and support them.
No heartburn about helping the agencies. I think that sounds great.
Yeah, I don't have any heartburn on those.
So we'll talk with the county. I think we may need to enter into an interlocal agreement with them. And then we'll do the same with the fire and rec, and then revisit this when we get a little bit further down the road, either with additional guidance or with the next allocation. So
one comment, if I could, I like our caution so far, and I'd really love some speed now on getting this county matching funds done.
Good.
So however quickly we can get that interlocal done and up and running.
I think they would like that too. And so we'll try and have that back at our next meeting.
Thanks.
Thanks.
No?
Okay.
No more comments? Can I add one future investigation for the staff to consider? One of my assignments for the city is serving on the mosquito abatement district for Davis County. There was some discussion in our last board meeting that some of the other cities within the county are considering a pass through to the mosquito abatement district because they are not directly eligible. They have had many employees that have had to quarantine. There's been issues with the pilot that's used to drop the insecticides being unable to fly because he was sick. So could we investigate what they might need and maybe have you come back with a recommendation based on what other cities in the sharing commonality in the mosquito district would do?
Yeah, you bet. If the council's comfortable with that, you bet. Okay.
You're comfortable with the direction?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, let's move on to our third item for our work session. That's department updates.
Francisco, if you don't mind
Page
bringing that
21.
document up. He's going to bring up our Jeopardy board. I just put together a table with a variety of topics that are on our minds, that I think are on your minds, some to some degree or a lesser degree. But what we'd like to do is just turn the time over to you, council, and if there are any of these or other topics that you would like updates from, we have all of our department heads here. We'd be happy to answer questions, give you a status update on as many of these as we can. And we can always continue this conversation to the next council meeting too. Right now, we don't currently have a work session scheduled, topic scheduled for that meeting. So
I want to use our time wisely because we don't have much time and there's so many great topics here. I'm sure that there are things here that we would love to have more in-depth work sessions about in the future. But I just want to quickly tell the department heads and these men that are here tonight, it's so awesome for me to see you all here together. And I just have to say while we're gathered that I just appreciate you, each one, so much and what you do for our city. So thank you for being here tonight and for the good men that you are. And I just, Utopia for 200. I'll ask Alan
You have to ask it in the form of a question.
Oh, okay. What is, so I'm hoping that we can, hey, here's the music and everything. I was hoping that we could just get a brief update on that. Is that Alan?
that might be me more than Alan.
Gary, okay.
I think when we last left our heroes, we'd been given a proposal by Utopia that included the next step being a survey to residents. And I've talked with a couple of you about this, but Millie?
Who would pay for that survey?
Good question. I don't know. Probably us. But we could use Qualtrics to do that, which we currently have the contract with. But as far as timing, my thought and recommendation is that we not pursue Utopia until after the bond has been voted on. One big issue at a time. That will certainly garner a lot of interest, but may also garner a lot of angst from people. But I think the question then is, right following the bond election, is do we also investigate other broadband? And that might be a better thing to do as a first step than a survey, is get a hold of some other agencies and see what our options are, or people who are doing their own broadband. If we're interested, it might be better to start there than it would be to just jump in with UIA/Utopia.
So do you think it's realistic that at the beginning of the year, we can just start considering some options?
Mhm.
Thanks.
I think so. If
Thank
you
you.
all want to.
Yeah.
Land transfer.
What's that?
Land transfer.
Oh, okay. This is Jaron Davis's proposal, who came, I think, I was not at that meeting, but I think he came during public comment and was proposing that he swap the land again that was considered a few years ago, but this time it could be used for a private cemetery. It would be great if the council could give direction, and if you were willing for me just to call him and say that the city's absolutely not interested. And
I can only speak for myself, but I'd be happy to speak to that if you're ready for comment. Okay. I don't think that it's going to be a meaningful difference to the residents who campaigned to save the mountain last time, if they're saving the mountain from a few homes, or if they're saving the mountain from inaccessibility because it's a cemetery. I think people want to be able to recreate on that public property the way it is. And I don't have any appetite at all to take on another land swap event like we held last time. So that's my opinion.
I think we get more than we give up because we have developed trails that I think it's worth investigating. I think that he should do the work, and he should do the, proving it's a good idea. But I think it's worth a discussion eventually. I think we get more than we give up.
What do we give up?
I was going to say, Mike.
Just what you said. We give up that. It becomes a cemetery, so then we don't have the same accessibility there because it's.
So you're willing to tell the folks that live up there and recreate up there that you're ready to have that discussion to sign over that property?
I'm not saying I'm willing to support the proposal. I'm willing to talk about the proposal, and I think he needs to prove why it's such a great idea.
Great.
Gary, the two questions I'm asked most.
Sorry, on that topic, can we just, I'd love to hear if there's other direction on that topic.
We have more on that topic.
I live near that neighborhood, and when I have asked neighbors what they would think of a different proposal, I have received a resounding hell no. And it has reinforced what my initial thought was, is that I don't know how the neighborhood can see it as anything but a bait and switch. That it wasn't long enough ago that they spoke clearly and forcefully. And so I have looked at the property from the opposite side, from the Elephant Rock overlook that Mr. Davis would like to propose a swap for. And it is a beautiful piece that would make for a wonderful connection for a trail, but it's not developable, so I don't think it's going anywhere, and there might be some other opportunity somewhere down the road. But I personally don't see how that neighborhood wouldn't feel incredibly betrayed, is my 2 cents.
Other comments on it?
Chris, Millie?
No, everything's been said, I think, at this point.
So just on that one, then we can move on. But there's no doubt in the mind of the residents up there that when the council voted to open or zone that as open space and preserve it as open space, that a cemetery was not contemplated. We added cemetery recommended that in our open space ordinance so that we could zone our own cemetery as open space, not because we thought that staff, I could just tell you, speaking from staff, not because we thought it would be good to put other open space in existing, or a cemetery in existing open space. I'm pretty sure that the residents would feel very much like it was a bait and switch by the council. A second part is what Mr. Davis is asking for is a letter of support to transfer that property. But once it's his, he's not obligated to put a cemetery there. There's no obligation. He can do what he wants with it, which includes pestering the city for the next 40 years to rezone it for another use. And we see that with property owners occasionally. I think the biggest thing is that it's just probably a fight that we may not want to pick right now. And so I get occasional calls from him about wanting to come and present to the city council, and I've avoided giving him direction. But if there was any direction you could give me now about either timing or a decision, that would be helpful.
I'm okay taking it off the table.
Comments?
I think you can tell them that it's too soon and that we have too much on our plate, and it's just not going to happen right now. There's not an appetite for it right now.
I would concur. I'm not interested in supporting a letter to the Forest Service on that swap.
Okay. Thanks for the direction
Check
on
one
that.
big thing off the list.
Okay, good. We'll take that off jeopardy.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks for the comments.
Thank you.
We move on to another. Gary, probably the two questions I'm asked most, because I spend a lot of time around the City Hall complex, is question on completion date, how far along we are, and also on the town square, when there may be an opening for the town square.
Okay, Lloyd, do you want to come up?
Where would you like me to start?
From the beginning.
Well, let's see, about 10 years ago,
It'll land
Just-
far away.
I think, yes.
City Hall, you want to start with
City Hall, start with City Hall.
So probably the best estimate I could give you or benchmark of where we are. We talk about this weekly. Where do you think we are percentage-wise? And I think as a team, we've pretty well landed that we're about 65% complete. I hope that in the last couple of weeks, as you've been by there, you've noticed a change. You're starting to see some of the weatherproofing go up on the exterior of the building. Right now, there's only just a handful of window panes that are not installed. We're very close to having the building actually dried in and weatherproofed. That's a big step, because that will allow the contractor to do many other things like finish hanging drywall. Most of the building has drywall on one side of the walls, and they're starting to put it on the second side and insulate. So that's a big deal. That means all the electrical work, rough in, is pretty well done. The plumbing work, plumbing rough in, is pretty well done. There are still a few mechanical issues for the mechanical rough that we're working on, and a few structural issues to deal with. One of the big issues we're dealing with right now is the elevator. You can't just walk into Home Depot and pull an elevator off the shelf. You have to order those in advance, and you have to lay down a significant amount of money to get your order started. Well, our elevator is built, and it's been sitting in a warehouse in Salt Lake for a while. But one of the things that has recently come to light is that we have a little bit of an issue between how it was built and how it was planned to be built. And so we're having to work through some adjustments to use our elevator, because we don't want to have to order a new one that's 16 weeks away. And we don't want to have to go through the fight of he said, she said, you did, they did, all that kind of stuff. We've just decided we're gonna not cut bait, we're gonna fish and figure out how to make it work. We'll deal with how to put some trim around it, make it look like by design instead of by accident. That's a very personal priority for me. I don't want it to look like a retrofit. It needs to look like it happened that way from the beginning. It's going to take a little effort though. Now let's get to the heart of it. When are we going to be done? About 3 weeks ago, I sat in a meeting with our contractor and we were talking about some dates. And those dates for owner occupancy were in January. And I said, that's not acceptable. I don't plan on hanging a Christmas stocking in the office I'm in. I don't want to spend the holidays in the office I'm in. We were promised that we would be in our building before the end of the year. And that's our goal. We expect to be in the building in December at the latest. We're working very hard to get there sooner. That's going to take some effort. When you're only 65% along, you still have a lot of work to do. And a lot of that finish work can be delicate work. You know, it takes some time, takes some care. So what you're going to see over the next few weeks are men working longer hours and people working on the weekends. Over the next couple of weeks, that's going to be the focus to see if we can get a big push and make some headway. And we're going to reevaluate that. The construction climate is still really hot. The engineering and building department has not missed a beat since March. Our inspectors have been busy. Our building officials have been busy doing plan checks, issuing permits. It's just the way the economy is around here. Things have not missed a beat for construction. That may pose a challenge for us because these guys who are working on our project have an armful of other projects that they neglect when they focus on us. So they need a minute to go catch up. You know, it is kind of fair that we take our turn. We're going to be plenty vocal about getting our turn. We're owed that. We've been working through this long enough. So that's where we're at. Is it where I would like to be? No, I'd like to be in that building right now. Honestly, our original construction date, our substantial completion date was Memorial Day. We were supposed to be in that building June 23rd. So to say November or December hurts. That's 5 months. Those were the number of months that we talked about in February when we first met with Ascent Construction and with Zurich, their insurance company, the surety on the project, that we were 4 months behind. They have worked very hard to get things going. It's not easy. I've watched them struggle to gain some speed, gain some momentum on the project, and get some things done, only to be met with an issue that takes a minute to resolve. I really feel like right now we have some good momentum, and we're doing everything we can to maintain that. There is going to be a point, though, where the work on the outside kind of slows down because we have done the majority of the things on the outside, and now we are really working hard on the inside. So, you know, when you drive by and you don't see an army of people around the outside, but there's a lot of cars, know that there's an army on the inside focusing on working in the basement, getting that stuff done, and then moving up to the top. And the people who are on the main floor are working to get that done so that they can trade places with the people in the basement. And we can just keep swapping crews and getting things done, top and bottom. Was that enough?
No, there's more than enough. I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy. We've had a little bit of experience with the Veterans Park, so I understand a little bit more with what you're going through. What
We'll
about
get there.
Town Square?
Town Square. That's a highlight. So we finally got our granite. Now, that's not to say that the granite we got was perfect. It was not. It's had its own set of challenges. But our mason who's working over there now has been working very carefully to make what we were shipped fit in and look like it should. He has 2 of the seat benches left. He's been working on the first east side, working to the south. So he has the 2 big seat walls to go. Actually, he probably has about 1.5 now. The water feature still has some work to be done. Next week, we have a commitment to have the surfacing like you would put inside of a pool. That's what goes in that linear interactive water feature instead of just the rough concrete surface. It's going to be a really nice finished surface. But the pool contractors, if you haven't called a pool contractor lately to price a pool, they won't even talk to you. You know, they're booked out for literally a couple years in advance now. The guys who put those surfacing materials on are in pretty high demand. They've told us that they're doing 6 pools a day. So we're on the list. They're supposed to be here next week. Once that's in, then we're going to fire that thing up, get some kinks worked out of it. Hopefully we can let some kids splash around in there for a minute. The ice system, we've tested that out once. We're gearing up to get ready to operate. That's pretty exciting. We did add a railing to go around that fire pit on the inside, just to keep the littles a little safer. So that's been installed. That stuff's all pretty well cleaned up and polished. We're getting very close. Probably not going to be ready to do much though before the 2nd week of September after Labor Day.
So, Gary, are we going to set like an announcement of an opening and a celebration or a?
So it's a great question. At this point, do we, and I think we're going to need some direction on the council, from the council, do we do a grand opening? Do we wait until snow flies, or rather ice freezes, to do a grand opening based on the ice season? We're still not entirely sure what the county is going to allow us to do. I've seen a lot of other splash pads open, but I think technically they're concerned about that because we can't control numbers. And I frankly haven't looked into it for a long time because it's been such a busy season so far. So I think that's a question we need to ask to find out the answer to, as well as, you know, are we going to be able to turn it on for any significant time? And so I just don't know the answer yet. And maybe next week at City Council, we can talk a little bit more during the work session about what we want, what you would like to see happen as far as a grand opening.
Thank you, Lloyd. I appreciate you. Thanks.
Oh, I would like to know, since we have Chief Ross here, a little bit about the police department morale.
Thank you for the question, and more importantly, thanks for recognizing that this is a difficult time in law enforcement. And I think it's fair to say that there have been times in the years past where it was easier to define based on geographic location how impacted you were going to be or not. So there might be things happening in Salt Lake County, for example, that Davis County officers didn't feel as much, or Cache County versus, you know, so we've seen that. But I can say that not only for Bountiful, but as I've been interacting with chiefs all across the state, that it's different now. And I think that there's a lot of questioning as to, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right profession? How do I act? How do I perform my job? For Bountiful, I feel very good that we've had a lot of programs and training and philosophies in place that I think have put us in a better position than maybe some places. But I have used this example, and I think it's important for you to know and all of us to know that we had a minority officer who was fantastic, been with us for about 1.5 years, loved it, treated very well by this community, no bad experiences, and he packed it in and left. And it was based on officers being charged in another state for, doing what some could interpret was the job that they were asked to do, or maybe the playing field at the time. Some might want to change it, but his fear was that other politicians, no issue with you, other city administrators, no issues with Gary, other chiefs, no issue with me, might be willing to sell them down the road in order to meet an expectation that the public pressure is putting on. And I think that's a big difference right now. I mean, we faced these issues in the past. These are legitimate conversations and things that we need to be working on in our profession and as a country and as a society. But for the police, I was just recently in a conversation with groups representing people of color that were having discussions at a Chiefs Association level, trying to work through, and the league, that we're in partnership with this Love, Listen, Lead initiative that we're doing. And I made the comment that I've been doing this job for 34 years, full and part-time, 32 years, full-time. And I'm a white police officer. And depending on the conversation that I'm in, there's times I wish I wasn't. For the first time in my career, I wish I was an officer of color, being able to say the same thing I'm saying as a white police officer, which is really trying to break through this perception to some extent that we don't care the same, or we're not trying to do things at the right level, or because we don't know what it feels like to walk in the shoes of somebody of color, which I don't. I do know what it's like to be unfairly treated, and what it's like to be wrongly accused, and what it's like to be singled out and maybe feel that it wasn't equitable. I would guess that many people that have interactions with law enforcement, even minor, from a traffic stop to something more serious as an arrest, don't like the way that it ended, even if an officer did things right. The fact that you got a ticket at the end of it, you might feel negative about that contact. If the officer gave you a verbal warning, you're happy, and you might even be happier about the contact. But that's a tough balance. And so I do think it's important for us as a city, and at times where we might feel that we are more isolated from this, or maybe it's not as problematic. I think there are residents in our community that feel it is, and certainly there's residents that don't. But for our officers, they're asking questions today that they weren't asking even in 2014 and 15 and 16. And that does cause me concern. And I hope that as we are looking and trying to do the right things as a community and as a city, that we don't lose sight of the sacrifices that they make, even in what we might feel is a great environment to work in, and it is, and we feel a lot of support from our residents. The same conversations are still happening. So I think morale is good in the sense that most of our employees are waiting to see what happens, and that's probably a fair statement for many departments. There are departments where officers are walking, and you've probably seen some of that in the news play out. It's certainly in other states, we're seeing that at higher levels. But I'm hopeful that, and I'm optimistic that as we work through these conversations, that it won't have to be that you, whether you walked in my shoes or not, that's the only way you can serve me. Because right now, overwhelmingly, the officers across this country are white males. And that may change over time, and that may even be the right thing to do, and it may be helpful, and we certainly encourage that. But what do we do in the meantime? So thank you for that question, and we're doing the best we can to try to keep people focused on, you know, maybe that things can be different. Just because something happened in Georgia doesn't necessarily mean Utah's the same way, or Minnesota or Minneapolis. But it's hard for officers to separate that. And I've had conversations with 3 or 4 officers in the past several months that are just not sure whether this is the profession for them longer term.
Well, I'm grateful for your leadership and measured judgment, and for the tone that you set for the department and the city. So thank you. But I'm sorry that this is the situation we find ourselves in.
Well, but like I said, I think there's a lot of positive that can come from going through this, and we need to be focused on that and do it in a way that we keep officers working while we determine if there's a better way to do things in the future. But it's not for lack of desire, and I think you know that. And I've always felt the support from the city. We've never rested on our laurels. We've never felt like we've achieved everything we should achieve. And we're still looking for the right answers and asking the questions. But it's a difficult time, and we hope someday it'll be easier for everybody. But thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
While the chief's here, thank you, by the way. I know you've taken a leadership role with the Chiefs Association, which came with the leadership role on Love, Listen, Lead, and that's a lot of extra time on top of a difficult time, you know, just helping our officers understand that. So Bountiful B, law enforcement issues, Chief and Gary, can we hit that for 5 minutes before we have to break for our full meeting?
Yeah,
do that?
I'm more than happy to.
4 minutes?
Absolutely. I'll go quick unless.
I'll take 1 minute and just say that at the next meeting, we're going to be considering an ordinance on fire restrictions that have already been adopted by the county and approved by the Forest Service, that will create some prohibitions on fires in North Canyon and Ward Canyon within a certain distance of the road. I think it's 200 feet. What did we end up with?
200 feet.
200 feet?
Yeah.
Which should help a lot of problems. Tom?
Can I just ask about signage? Will there be signage, or who provides that? How is that?
So we'll need to continue working. That was discussed but not resolved yet with the parties, and we'll work with Chief Bassett on that.
And he's been instrumental in helping with that fire ordinance, as you're well aware. So that's been good. If I was a resident by the B, I would feel frustrated and feel like not enough's happening. If they were sitting in the meetings that I've been sitting in, and Gary and others, they would find a couple things. One is these are difficult things to get resolved quickly and even timely. And the numbers of conversations and meetings that have been occurring, because we are passionately wanting to do things to improve the B. I think as a city, we all feel that way. There's good things that are coming to fruition. There's been good conversations with the trailhead area, the parking lot. We're continuing in conversations with the property owner there and the county, and trying to get everybody to be able to move something forward. We think the development in the area is going to be an improvement. I'll be the first to say the graffiti right now in that detention basin is terrible, the worst we've ever seen. And even with all the work that the youth council every year and being painted. So, but again, as the development comes in, and especially if we get that trailhead and maybe have some lighting and some cameras, maybe some fencing, and Gary and I have talked about this several times. I think there's some good things that could come from this, so that we're not talking about it again next the end of next summer going, why didn't this happen? But as Gary will tell you, there's also been times we felt that we were further down the road and then a hurdle gets thrown in, and it's not something that Bountiful City in and of itself can say, we can fix this. We have to have other partners to get that resolved. And in the Forest Service that we had, and that may be some conversation tonight, so I know we're running, but you know, the bullet issue things, trying to control shooting in the Forest Service area. I've been at the table in the past in conversations, more than happy to be at the table again. There's conversations that need to continue to happen. But for anyone that's ever dealt with Forest Service areas, and some of you have a little bit of knowledge, very difficult, very political, very bureaucratic, and a lot of people that have an ability to kill programs based on not even living anywhere in this state, let alone Bountiful. But the fire, we've been talking about fire restrictions my entire 14 and a half years. And here we are on the cusp of actually getting something done. So I hope that's not what we're saying 10 years down the road, but the B area is something that I'm more excited about. I'm just frustrated that it's not faster, and I think Gary would share the very same sentiment.
Thank you, Chief.
Anything else? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, can we close this work session and take 5 minutes and prepare for city council?
Can we do department head Jeopardy again?
Yes. Yeah, we'd like to do it quarterly, and we could even finish this next work session if you'd like.
I'm hoping that we can take some of these things in work sessions and invite the department heads that it applies to, so that so we don't have to bring them here for nothing if they don't, if we don't talk about their item, but so that we can discuss all of these things eventually. So, thanks.